Hello and welcome to the session. In this session we are going to look at EQ. So there are three different types of EQ. There is a multiband parametric EQ, which looks like this. We have a graphic EQ, which looks like this, slightly different. Okay. And then finally we have our semi-parametric EQ, which is a combination of both. Okay. So you may be asking yourself, what does an EQ do? Well, EQ is short for equalization, and that means you are going to reduce or increase certain frequencies of a recorded audio to make it sound better or worse, depending on how you use it. Okay, so let's have a look at how we can use it. So I'm going to loop a section of this track, and I'm going to have a listen to our kick drum and solo it. Okay, so this is our kick drum. Sounds very much like a kick drum to me. It could sound better though. Definitely could sound better. Could sound a lot worse as well. So the way we use an EQ is first we select it, turn it on. It's got some settings that I did there. So we can, first things first, let me show you how we use a certain frequency. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to select frequency, this bottom one, pull it up, and then move it across to hear the range of frequencies on this kick drum. Okay, so let's play it and have a listen. Okay, so as we go down here, let's have a listen to the low end content and the mid content. Going to find something that we like. That's very ringy, so we'll probably won't stop there. Keep going down, see what happens. That sounds quite nice. Obviously we don't want to hear as much, because that sounds a bit too impacty. What we can do is we can pull it down. As we pull it down, the frequency still increases, but we don't hear as much as that boominess. Okay. So we can increase certain frequencies. And you may be asking yourself, can we decrease certain frequencies to get rid of them? Well, yes, we can. So if we found this ringing was really offensive, we could pull it down all the way. And that removes it. Equally so as we go across. Okay, it's not as noticeable. So what I recommend is when you're decreasing frequencies in a frequency band or an instrument is have a listen to them first so you can find out what you're decreasing. So for example, if I didn't like this particular frequency around 680 Hertz, what I could do is select it and then pull it down. And then that ringing has gone. Okay, I'm going to put this back to where it was. It was on 62 Hertz. So that's increasing frequencies and then decreasing frequencies. So just to recap that, what we did was we selected our band of this multiband compression, of this multiband EQ, sorry, and selected the band, increased it to hear what we're increasing, and then moved it across to find out what we liked or don't like. Okay. What we can do is, you may be asking yourself, how come this certain frequency is shallower than this one? Okay, that's because EQ has something called a Q on it. The Q, or the width of the frequency increasing and decreasing, affects how much of the frequencies you're affecting. Okay, so if we take this yellow frequency again and we increase our Q, which is this one here, you'll see it get wider and wider and wider and wider. Okay. So I'm going to hit play again and have a listen to what the effect is when we change the Q of our EQ. That's quite wide, and here it comes narrow. Hear how affecting less there and more when it's wide? There we go. Just to give you a better example of this, I'll move the frequency up to our mid-range around 500 Hertz. So it's affecting much more of the frequency bands. So that's it very narrow, but you can hear that ping. And here's it much wider. Has much more great effect because we're affecting all the frequencies now from down to about 40 hertz all the way up to 10 kilohertz. Okay, so we'll put that back. It's around there somewhere. Okay, so that is a multi-band parametric EQ. We've talked about the Q and we talked about the frequency, and we've also mentioned the gain, which is how much we increase and decrease it. Okay. Now this settings can be found on the other two EQs that we got. So on our semi-parametric EQ, the only thing that we're missing is the width of our track, of our EQ, sorry. So these will be set at different frequencies, and they'll have a Q set into them that you cannot change, which is quite nice because different types of semi-parametric EQs will be good for different types of instruments, and that's up to you to go out and find which ones apply to each of them. Then finally we have our graphic EQ, which will be this one. As you can see on the graphic EQ, very similar again. The only thing we have are these little dials which move up and down over the frequency ranges, and these affect certain frequencies and use a very narrow width. So to give a graphic representation of this, there we go. The width for these will look very similar to that. So we have a band down at 31 hertz, we have a band at 63 hertz, one at 125, one at 250, one at 500, doubling up as they go. Okay, and these are also known as very musical frequencies, depending on the EQ that you're after. Okay, so you'll have one like that. There'll be one similar to that. There'll be another one. Many more bands than on this multi-band parametric EQ. Okay, but it's a graphic EQ. Just gives you a representation of what's going on graphically in this format. Both can be used for the same thing, for corrective and creative EQ. So, corrective EQ requires very tight whips because you're removing frequencies that are ringing or you don't like. And then corrective EQ will add certain characteristics to a sound. For example, on our kick drum channel, this one here, I added in a bit more of the bottom end, as we saw, and then I removed some area of the mid to make it sound less boxy. And I also got rid of any bottom end, any sub, using a high pass filter. The high pass filter removes all the bottom end below it and lets all the high frequencies pass, hence high pass filter. That sounds like this. So you can hear there's a lot of bottom end content, a lot of sub in the kick drum. As we move up our high pass filter, that reduces and reduces. So we just hear the attack. There we go. Hear the difference between a high pass filter set high and the high pass filter set low. Okay. Generally on drum tracks, I use a high pass filter to remove all the sub on the bottom end or anything that's going to interfere with my select recorded instrument. It's also very good to use on a vocal track. On a vocal track to remove any bottom end. On this particular recording, it was recorded live in one room, and the bass guitar has leaked onto this vocal recording. So let's have a listen to this. You can just hear the bass leaking into that microphone, unfortunately, even though we did put it in a corner. So that's with the high pass filter, and then as we reduce the high pass filter, you'll start to hear more and more of that bass guitar. So that's going all the way out, and then here's coming all the way in. Okay, so you can see there we got rid of the majority of the bottom end sub-content of the bass guitar, which really helps us when we're adding compression and other audio processing units to that particular channel, so that we are just affecting the vocal and nothing else that's leaked onto the microphone. Okay, So just to recap very quickly, there are 3 types of EQ. There is a graphic EQ, which has numerous faders to pull up and down. There is a multi-band parametric EQ, which will be set around, which has about 5 or 6 bands that you can control, increasing and decreasing, using the width, the gain, and the frequency. And then there's a semi-parametric EQ, which has gain and frequency, but has no Q control. You can use EQ in 2 ways, creative and corrective. Corrective EQ will reduce any rings and pops and clicks, and then creative EQ will add or remove certain characteristics from a sound recording. Thank you very much. That's today's EQ session.